recording. All right. So welcome again, folks, for the people who have just joined us. This webinar, as I said, is associated with, actually it's going to be associated with both Udu's Clue, 2 articles ago, and then also the most recent article, Intimate Connections, which was all about Kendra and Trikona Sambandha. Does anybody remember what it was also about? I introduced a new concept I'd not really written before, coming from one section of Parashara Hora. Does anybody recall what that was and what it's referred to? No one.
Mutual co-workers.
All right, thank you. Thank you. You rescued me here, Venkat. This idea of mutual co-workers. And what's the idea? What's the concept about mutual co-workers? Under what conditions could such planets said to be indicators of Yogakarkas, Raja Yogakarkas? What's the concept?
If 2 planets are in an angular relationship with each other, and they also have a good dignity, then they become Yogakarakas and
can give that result. What makes them even better? If they're not just in angles from each other and they're not just in a good dignity, what could even improve those? What can make it even better? Yoga.
If they are in angles from the ascendant, and if particularly one of them is in the 10th house.
Okay, good. You learned your lesson well, Venkat. So any 2 planets that are in angular relation to each other, and I pay attention to degrees, how close in angles are they to each other, and if they have a dignity that is at least that of friend, great friend, or upwards, then these could be said to be these mutual co-workers that can give Raja Yoga Karka. If they're falling in angles from the birth lagna, it's better. And if one of these planets is in the 10th house, which means the 10th lord would be either in its own sign, typically, or in its exaltation sign, could be in a sign of a great friend or friend, though, then this is going to produce this type of condition. Right. Okay, so then with that in mind, we're going to look at some charts here. But before we do that, I posted an exercise, related to these lessons. And tell me when you see this chart. This exercise was posted in the Facebook group. So that's what I mean when I say I posted an exercise. Does everybody see a chart with Cancer Lagna?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we had a couple of comments from people who are in this webinar, some very intelligent comments about this particular chart and the period and subperiod I was asking about, which was Moon Mercury. But before we get into that, what are really distinguishing features of this birth chart? Real distinguished features.
Jupiter is exalted in Lagna with Digbala.
So Jupiter here is in its exaltation sign, also getting directional strength. Do you see any other source of strength for it, Venkat?
It is in its own house in D9.
It's in its own house in D9. Now, one of my beginning students would point out, well, it's also in a Gandanta condition. Doesn't that count? And the answer is, I've talked about how certain principles supersede others, right? I'm not saying it has no significance here, but in terms of Jupiter's ability to give its results strong and favorably from the side that it does that, it's certainly very strong, right? It's a distinctive feature of this chart. And what kind of yogas is Jupiter involved in here?
Saraswati.
So there's Saraswati yoga here. What else? That Jupiter's very much part of.
Hamsa yoga.
Hamsa yoga, right? Strong Hamsa yoga. What else?
Lord of 9th in first is a Raja Yoga by position.
Raja yoga by position, and then could also be considered what kind of yoga by placement? 9th lord in the first.
9th lord.
Dhani yoga.
So
Yeah,
give both Raja and Dana yoga qualities. So Jupiter is certainly a very distinctive feature of this chart. And what else? What's another very distinctive feature?
Jupiter, Venus form, again a good Raja Yoga, Lord of the 9th and the Lord of the 4th. And
There are two Mahapurusha yogas, Sashi Yoga and the Hamsha Yoga. Saturn, very, very strong. Directional
So
strength.
let's start that Sashi Yoga here. How strong, Rohit?
Well, it's super strong. It's Vargottama, it's Digbala, it's, you know, it has
Swakshetra.
and yeah, and look at the degrees. I mean, it's you know, it's pretty much going to be in that, you know, in its own
Very
house.
strong.
Very,
Very strong. Very strong. And then Venkat just mentioned that the Jupiter in a mutual glance with Saturn and Venus form additional angle trine and also 9/11, so done yoga combinations, right? So quite a dramatic configuration along 1/7. Now come to the moon here. Okay, come to the moon, because I asked about this period. What's the first thing we'd evaluate about this? What's the first thing would register with us about this moon? And first thing we always look for with regards to the moon.
Quite dark.
Debilitated.
It's dark and waning, and it's an instabilization sign. And so from that standpoint, it doesn't look that great, right?
Yeah.
I asked about the kind of results the moon could give. Those conditions aside, just in terms of its placement and associations, in terms of at least a structure, what yoga is based on house lordship does the moon could potentially give?
Raja Yoga.
Raja Yoga.
And a Dana Yoga too.
So it's a 1-5 combination by placement, right?
Yeah.
And what additionally qualifies that? What positive thing happens?
The aspect of Jupiter.
The aspect of Jupiter. Now, keep in mind what the topic of the article was, the last article I wrote. What might you extend then in terms of what's going on with this Jupiter?
Jupiter, Moon form a good Raja Yoga again.
If you take, go ahead. Somebody said?
No, they are in trine. The moon is in trine with Jupiter.
So the Moon-Mercury combination is in a very close Kendra or Trikona Sambandha with Jupiter. Of course, the Moon-Jupiter combination is a good combination for this lagna, right?
Yeah.
So then it comes down to, since Moon shows the potential to give Raja Yoga and some effect of Dana Yoga, it comes down to will it? And to what degree? Which, of course, you all know is to some extent a matter of strength, right? Does Moon seem to get any cancellation of its stability here?
Absolutely. With Jupiter and Kendra aspecting onto the moon, it does get a certain amount of Nijbhanga.
Well, it's a real beneficial thing for the moon. It's really not a factor for cancellation per se. Does it enhance the kind of results the moon can give you? Yes. But, there's no, the typical things we look for.
Sure. I mean, yeah. The main ones are not there, but also, I mean, just the fact that it's, Jupiter, exalted Jupiter is aspecting onto it, and plus it has directional strength, and the Vamsha does empower the moon.
Okay. All right. Well, now you're getting at directional strength in the Vamsha. But you've all read, as a part of this program, an article called Graha Bala, right?
Yeah.
Where I was advocating a certain approach to evaluating in a more holistic and complete way the kind of results a planet can give. In which case, do you see any potential, somewhat not apparent, rather hidden source of strength for the moon?
Shadbala is good mark at 146, and Vimshottari is Vimshopak Bala is also at 15.2, very good.
Particularly the Vimshapaka Bala, right? Anything 14 and above starts to become significantly strong. And so, remember the 4 signs that really help contribute to a strong 20-point strength, strong Vimshapaka Bala that I've told people they should always sort of evaluate out of the 10 Vargas that are used to create this? Anybody remember that?
I think Trikona is one of them. D3 is one of them. Yeah. Navamsha is the second one.
Mm-hmm. D60.
D60, right? So Rashi and Navamsha, except for, the moon's directional strength here in Navamsha, the dignities themselves don't contribute much. But if you look at the Trikona, which I will show you here in the lower right corner, what do you notice? Moon in its own sign, right?
Yeah.
And then look at Shastayamsha. Again, moon in its own sign. And if I pulled up the 10 Vargas and showed you where the moon fell in each of them and what its dignity is, you would see why it actually has a quite healthy, quite strong, significantly strong Vimshapaka Bala. And this is why it's important to evaluate that strength in a more holistic way, because now it puts a different twist on the kind of results this moon period can bring. We already saw that it has the structure that can give it both Raj and Dhan Yoga. And now we're seeing that it actually has a source of strength, so it can give this rather strongly. Now, those of you who took my Lagu Parashari webinar or read my book, what is a sub-period that becomes eligible for giving that? A very obvious sub-period that becomes eligible for giving the potential Raj and Dhan Yoga results that the moon can give, just based on the birth chart. Mm-hmm.
There are
Anybody have any
many planets, Mark. Could be Venus, could be Saturn.
What could be a very obvious one, though?
Moon,
Yes.
Jupiter.
Jupiter.
Moon, Jupiter. What might be another obvious one?
Moon, Rahu.
Moon, Rahu. I'll accept that because Rahu gives the results of Jupiter, aspecting by Jupiter. This one you may not remember, but it says that when a planet can give Raja Yoga Pal, the fruit of Raja Yoga, it can even do so in the sub-period of a Trishadai Lord, as long as they're strongly Sambandha.
Yep.
Which is what Mercury is here, right? And remember which result Mercury gives here? What yoga result does Mercury give?
Saraswati Yoga.
Saraswati Yoga. Now come to Udu's clue. In which nakshatra does the moon fall?
Mercury.
Mercury's. And therefore, the other aspect of Udu's clue, when you run the sub-period of that dispositor, right, then you see the most dramatic effects. Does anybody know whose chart this is? I must say that Rohit and Georgie did a very excellent analysis. You should, and conclusions from it. You should see it in the Facebook group if you haven't. Does anybody know who this is? Does anybody recognize this name?
Oh.
He's a man who was a very successful university professor, philosopher, but then at the age of 42, he started writing fiction. And he wrote a book called Name of the Rose, which was a murder mystery set in a medieval monastery that became this runaway international bestseller that launched him as a very successful novelist. And it started in Moon Mercury. And so this is an illustration, in my view, of both Udu's clue, but also Kendra and Trikona Sambandha. Without this connection with Jupiter, there's no way that the moon gives. And of course, you think about the planets. What Rohit and Georgie saw is that there's really strong indications of success as an author here, both from a Parashari point of view, and then also from the Jaimini point of view, which we'll discuss in a moment. So this is why this becomes a good illustration for principles related to the last two articles I wrote, and also this idea of how to get a more complete and thorough assessment of planetary strength, you need to look at those quantitative measures as well. Rohit, why don't you outline what factors exist here that show success as an author from a Jaimini point of view that you saw?
Jupiter and Mercury are the karakas for writing, and and Venus less so. And in the Gemini system, if you have Jupiter and Mercury aspecting onto the Karakamsha Lagna or the Swamsha, that can make a writer of a very high caliber. And
add the moon to that.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
right. Right. So if you add, and add the moon to that as well. In this case, his Swamsha is Pisces, and Jupiter and Mercury are in Pisces, and Jupiter definitely has strength there.
And
So,
Venus falls in the fifth, but apply it in the birth chart first. Who's the Karakamsha Lagna here?
the Karakamsha Lagna is going to be it's going to be Pisces, and you know
Right.
the fifth from there has the aspect of Jupiter, Moon, and Mercury.
That's
Jupiter,
it.
Yeah.
That's it. So you see the Jaimini combinations here, both in the birth chart and in the Vamsha for successful authorship. Now think about applying that same combination dynamically, which I've talked about for those of you who've studied Jaimini from me. What happens when he runs his Capricorn period in Jaimini? When he runs his Capricorn period, what happens? Do you see that Capricorn itself gets the Rashi Drishti of Venus is there, gets the Rashi Drishti of Mercury and the Moon, and the fifth house from their Taurus gets the Rashi Drishti of Jupiter and Venus. Then think about what kind of combination for Capricorn, Venus, and Saturn is. So this was the major period where he authored this international bestseller, and then when it got published and he started getting the initial fame and recognition, he won several literary awards, was in the Aquarius subperiod. Why the Aquarius subperiod proved to be so good in terms of name and fame within Capricorn, Aquarius subperiod.
Second house from Aquarius, the 10th from there gets the Moon Venus Raj Yoga, the Moon Raj Yoga, which is aspected by 4 planets, and which is also aspected by an exalted AMK. So I mean, multiple factors there.
Yeah, you see it all. Think of how many planets influence the 10th house, and there you have the Moon Venus combination. But really, what you really do have is the AK-AMK combination. Mercury is the AK. Jupiter, this very, very powerful Jupiter is the AMK. So congratulations for those people who responded to the exercise and saw all this. So that's what I wanted to talk about. First, any questions about anything we said thus far before then we go on and look at other charts? Okay.
His Mercury is quite like the comedian's chart, who was the who died very early, the guy who in Saturday Night Live.
You mean
His
Chris
Mercury.
Farley? Chris
Yes,
Farley.
yes.
Yeah, right. Cancer Lagna again. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm pulling up a document.
Mark, just one question regarding retrograde Jupiter. How would that play? And I also read that sometimes a retrograde planet exalted, maybe the other way around, it's equal to debilitated. I kept that aside while analyzing, but I thought I'll ask you today.
That statement comes from Paladipika, and you have to sort of understand the context. If you apply that principle, it'll be true sometimes. It'll apply that principle blindly, you'll go wrong. He actually contracted cancer and died in his Jupiter Mahadasha. You know, if you look, if I showed you the chart again, Jupiter's the 6th lord in the 1st, aspected by both Saturn and Mars. Saturn is a Marak and also 8th lord. But he was 82 also, you know, and he had fairly good longevity. But if you're asking, does, you know, Jupiter also give Arishta Yoga? The answer is yes, and doesn't protect as well as it might normally, based on a principle I was taught by K. Rao, based on its retrograde. You know, in the world of Jyotish, there's also the notion that it's another source of strength, because in the Chesta Bala calculation in Shadbala, it gets a full additional rupa for being what's called Vakra, crooked retrograde. That was not a principle K. and Rao emphasized, so it's not one that I particularly emphasize, but you'll see it in the world of Jyotish, and it has some validity that way. Anyway, we want to focus on this chart now. I'm going to increase the point size here a little bit. Hold on, so that maybe people can see the chart a little better, or the degrees in particular. Everybody should be able to see this chart now, yes?
Yeah.
Taurus Lagna. So Burt Reynolds, for those of you who don't recognize the name, he's a Hollywood movie star from days past. He actually passed away. He passed away just the other day, which is why I thought to be looking at this chart again. Passed away in Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter, based on the article, Lord Yama pays a visit. In what way was that predictable? Mercury,
Mercury is
Saturn,
the Maraka. It's a second lord.
Mercury is a primary Maraka, being the second lord. Subperiod was Saturn. What would you make of that?
That it can kill any time.
That it's an unqualified Maraka. It's a way of saying it. Right? Kind of casually. Oh yeah, I can kill it anytime. What makes it particularly eligible this way in this chart? Think about the positional relationship from the sub-period lord, from the major period lord.
212 relationship.
It's a Maraka from Mercury.
Right. Over and over again, if you look at the chapter on, interpreting Dasha Antardasha in Parashara, it mentions if the sub-period lord falls second from the major period lord, then there's danger to life. Of course, that's going to only be true in a certain context. But here, Saturn is the second lord in the second house from Dasha Lagna with Mars, and then Jupiter as a sub-period lord.
Jupiter's in a Maraka house.
Jupiter's in a Maraka house, and remember this idea that natural benefics in the seventh or the second become the, quote, surest killers. Remember this idea from the Law Group Parashi, for those who studied that with me. So, but what I want to talk about here is he became a major movie star in his Jupiter Mahadasha. Jupiter Mahadasha. Is there any way, based on the Rashi, that Jupiter could be seen as a period in which he was performing, in which he was acting? Is there any way that could be seen?
From the moon.
From the moon. You see that Jupiter is in the third house from the moon. Now, is there any way that Jupiter forms any kind of angle-trine combination giving Raja Yoga? Because obviously this period elevated him from either seeing that from the birth lagna or from the moon.
No.
There is Jupiter-Saturn Kendra relationship. Jupiter is the fourth lord and Saturn is the fifth lord from moon.
From Chandra Lagna Virgo, the combination of Saturn and Jupiter can form an angle-trine combination. Of course, Mars would also be the third lord. So my hypothesis is, I'm not insisting on it, that actually one of the reasons that Jupiter could give the result it gave is that it does form this combination from here. The answer is more evident in what's going on with Jupiter here just in terms of source of strength.
It's like
It's in Vamsha, right?
Parivartana.
It's in Aquarius to begin with. And by the way, you've heard me talk about this idea that Jupiter gives very strong results in Aquarius, almost like an exalted planet. And I told you it was something that was taught to me by Mr. Rao. And I knew that he was referencing some classic, but I've never before been able to recall what that classic is, and I found it. You'll find it in Brihad Jataka, in the chapter on the planets in the signs, and where it overtly states that Jupiter's results in Aquarius will be like that of in Cancer. So if anyone was looking for the classical reference on that idea, you have it now, okay? But here you see it strong by virtue of the fact it's involved in this exchange here, and falling 10th involved in a good education yoga here from the Vamsha, but then see Dashamsha. And you'll notice that Jupiter here is, again, very strongly placed. I have a hypothesis, by the way, and it's just speculation on my part, that the D10 Lagna is not Taurus, it's actually Gemini. Part of my supposition about that is that if you Burt Reynolds got his first big break acting when he started appearing on the Western TV show Gunsmoke as a regular character on that old TV show. This was back in the 1963 or something like that. And it happened in his Rahu Sun period. And of course, those would be the period and subperiod of 2 planets in the Lagna of D10 were that the case. And it would also put Jupiter, the next period, as the 10th Lord in the 10th. Now, does anybody, going back to the Rashi here and keeping in mind in what you saw there in the D10, does anybody want to hazard a guess as to what sub-period in the Jupiter major period was his big breakout performance that really catapulted him to more like superstar status? And I will give you a hint. It is in keeping with principles from the last 2 articles.
Mercury?
Mercury,
And why did you say Mercury?
dispositor of Jupiter and in 3rd house from Jupiter. I mean, nakshatra Jupiter, sorry.
And you'd be absolutely right. Good for you. Who's speaking? Who's speaking?
This is Bhargavi.
Bhagri. Good. Well done. What is actually from the birth logna the only really significant Raja Yoga combination?
4-5 Sun Mercury in 9th house.
It's the Sun-Mercury combination in his 9th. It's a 4-5 angle trine combination. Obviously, it's also the Lord of 2nd and 5th in the 9th, giving also then Dhan Yoga results. And when he ran his Mercury Mahadasha, according to this principle that the Udu's clue is all about, that's getting activated. Then, the other part of principle that I was emphasizing in Udu's clue is that then when a person runs the sub-period, just like in the chart of Umberto Eco, runs the sub-period of that nakshatra sponsor, boom, that's when you see the most significant results. He starred in a movie called Deliverance, rather a disturbing film, but it really made him, he went really was a sort of like a breakout role for him that then, made him a much bigger Hollywood star, much more significant. And then if you look at D10 again, let's presume that the Lagna is Gemini, not Taurus. What strikes you about Jupiter-Mercury?
10th from Jupiter.
Secrets of the Dushamsha, the sub-period lord falling 10th, and in this case also in Jupiter's sign, right? So, we can see how this period and sub-period, based on principles you've all learned, proved to be special. Right? Whether Jupiter and Saturn by Kendra Sambandha are forming an angle trine combination from the moon, and that's one of the reasons that Jupiter, from the standpoint of the Rashi, again, this is speculative on my part. Okay, questions about anything we said before? Or one thing I also wanted to additionally mention, in the article, by the numbers benign, I told you that I was, doing some researches with regards to what's called the Iyer, Shashadri Iyer, Rudramsha, the 11, and how it can also indicate periods of great financial gains, honors, and awards. And you think about the periods here that were successful for him. Again, not sure if we got accurate D11 Lagna here, but Jupiter certainly is well placed. Jupiter is certainly well placed here, the period that he had his greatest stardom. And by the way, he only one time in his career, and it was at the very end of his career, he was nominated for an Academy Award. There was some movie called Boogie Nights. And he was in his 50s. I think he was in his late 50s. He might have even been in his early 60s. I forget which. Only time he was nominated for Academy Award. Didn't win, but was nominated. Based on what principles of Jyotish could you see the Saturn-Rahu period where he's nominated for an award, where he's up for an honor? Is there any?
Multiple, because Rahu is going to give you the results of Jupiter, and Jupiter is the 11th lord of this chart. And
Okay.
yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the principles that I would apply.
And Saturn's easy to see in terms of period bringing elevation recognition. It's the Raja Yoga Karaka for Taurus, really strongly placed in its own 10th house. But remember this article, Kaleidoscope of Time, that I talked about, that I was emphasizing some principle in terms of
The
Dasha
Dashalagna,
Lagna. Yeah, what do you see here from Dasha Lagna in terms of
11th.
Saturn Rahu?
Rahu falls in the 11th from Saturn.
And what kind of planet does Venus become from Dasha Lagna?
Yoga Karaka.
Raja Yoga Karaka, right? So this is another iron and steel that turned out, in fact, one of the beneficial relationships talked about in Parashara Hora that I brought out in that article is when they're 311 from each other, or some period lord in particular is falling 11th from the major period lord here. So otherwise, it would kind of be a little difficult to see how Saturn Rahu could bring this result. I forget what happens to them. Yeah, they're not Sambandha in D10 here. Okay, so moving on. Most people, I think, should recognize this name and get another sort of iconic Hollywood actress who's had a really, really long career. She started acting in her late teens, early 20s, and I think she's in her late 70s and still going strong. She's had some ups and downs in her careers, but she's really come on here in a very older age, which is rather unusual, particularly for an actress. Hard to get roles. But she first came to some fame and recognition, first became a movie star, you might say, in her Venus Mahadasha. Just on the basis of the Rashi, how might you predict that? Just on the basis of the Rashi. Why? How could this period make her a star?
Well, Venus is the Yoga Karaka for this.
Right.
Yeah.
Which when I first looked at this Rohit was my explanation back when I was a relatively new student of Jyotish. But then I started seeing a bunch of charts with Capricorn Lagna, and person ran the major period of their Yoga Karaka planet and didn't necessarily experience this kind of success, right? And so, as a much older and experienced Jyotish, I have different thoughts about why the major period of Venus could give this result based on the last article I wrote. Can anyone see what those might be?
Venus, Mars, Sambandha, Kendra Sambandha.
So Venus here is in a Kendra Sambandha with Mars, which would be a 4-5 combination, right?
Yeah.
What else?
It can be also Venus, Saturn, Trikona Sambandha, which is a 1-5-1-10 combination.
What else?
Venus Moon.
Venus Moon. In which case, Venus here is the 10th lord, the 5th lord, trine lord, and look at the degrees here, very close. It's my opinion, as I was expressing in this article, that one of the reasons that Venus could give the results that it did is not just because it's the Yoga Karaka. I believe by this Kendra and Trikona Sambandha, it gets support in other ways. And then Mercury, which was the subperiod where she first got this stardom, which is not one that you would, so to some degree, the previous period of Venus Saturn, right? Was success. She was acting on Broadway, but she first started appearing in movies in Venus Mercury, which I think some of you have seen this before. In the article, the numbers but benign. What's going on here in the Shamsha?
Shubha Sankhya Yoga.
Of course, Venus has a nice, couldn't be hardly a better placement here, exalted in the 5th house, aspected by the 5th lord Jupiter, getting directional strength in the 1st house, but then Mercury is some period lord, also well placed, and there's a Shubha Sankhya Yoga, 5-9. Shubha Sankhya Yoga between Mercury and Venus, which is, in my mind, what helps explain what happened in the Venus-Mercury period.
Also in the Rashi mark, Mercury is the nakshatra dispositor of Venus.
I forgot to mention this. Thank you, Venkat. that's another reason, in my opinion, that Mercury and the Sun here are placed in the 12th house for sure, but they're also well, anyway, I won't go more into that. I believe Saturn and Mercury here also, by Kendra Sambandha, form a significant yoga here. But you're right, Venus is also in Mercury's nakshatra. And so it's an illustration of that principle I'm preaching here.
Plus, Venus is also part of Ubhachari Yoga here.
Yes, it is. Very good. It's got benefics on both sides of the sun.
Was Venus Jupiter good? Was Venus Jupiter really good?
No, absolutely. There's Shubha-Upachara Yoga here. Jupiter on one side, Venus on the other. A little marred by the Rahu-Ketu axis, but there is it's part of Shubha-Upachara Yoga.
And was Venus Jupiter particularly good for her?
She was acting. She was acting. Venus Jupiter, Venus Saturn, Venus Mercury, but Mercury was the breakout period.
Okay.
The Shubha-Upachara Yoga actually explains why the stardom continued in the Sun period, right, which it did.
Mark, have you heard of this concept with Sun and Mercury being in 4 houses, in one of the 4 houses that can prove especially beneficial?
Say this again.
There are 4 houses where if you have the Sun-Mercury combination, it can be, and it doesn't matter what the lordship is, it can be very, very beneficial.
And where does this come from?
This is a concept that K.N. Rao used to teach. There was a Nadi Jyotish, whose concept he borrowed. And so those houses are 3, 5, 8, and 12.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm not familiar with this idea.
Okay, so I'm actually have a bunch of charts which have proven to be, Roger Federer's is one of them, which prove this theory, and I still keep collecting it. But yeah, I'll add this to it. But just wanted to let you know, since everybody's here.
Sure, you should write an article about that, Rohit. I'd be interested in reading that.
Sure.
And citing your reference there. Interesting. Okay. All right. So now, Indians would certainly recognize this name. Who is this Venkat?
Oh, he's the god of cricket.
God of cricket. That's all we can say.
He's just got divine status. I wasn't going to give him divine status, but I think in terms of Indians and cricket, he is considered to be the god of cricket. Usually successful, and I've used this chart before in different ways, but why would I be showing it to you today in keeping with the last article?
Because of his Mars period?
Well, because of his Mars period, but specifically, what about his Mars period and related to the last article?
The Mars-Jupiter combination, the Mars-Venus combination.
Mars-Sun.
The Mars-Sun combination. Because so go ahead.
I think Mars-Saturn also.
Well, Mars, when he ran his Mars period, there's lots going on here. If you take Kendra and Trikona Sambandha, lots going on. Right? Now, some would say, you don't need much explanation beyond the fact that Mars is a Yoga Karaka planet and is forming a 9-10 Raja Yoga in the angle house, with Jupiter getting Nichabanga Raja Yoga, et cetera, right? But, this period was truly extraordinary, okay? Truly extraordinary. And again, why would I be showing you this in relationship to the last lesson, besides the fact there's a lot of planets that also make additionally Kendra and Trikona Sambandha? Think about what we were talking about to start out the lesson. That was a part of this article.
Mutual co-workers?
Yes, mutual co-workers. Who are mutual co-workers here?
Mars
and Sun.
Mars and Sun, both exalted. Now think about the degrees in which these planets get exalted. extreme exaltation.
28 and 10.
Right. Bingo. Okay. And by the way, this is a combination given in the ancient text for being a great warrior, which of course he was. And, Mars is aspecting onto the sun in Mars's sign. So there's a Sambandha from that standpoint, but they are mutual co-workers. And remember, mutual co-workers that come out of the 10th house.
Yeah.
Right? I believe that Mars, there's a lot more going on with this Mars than just the 9-10 combination here that indicates the kind of period this was in terms of Raja Yogapal, Dana Yogapal, you name it, right? So something to, make note of in light of what was in the last article, right? And then, usually when you get this kind of dramatic result, there's additional reasons for it. What do we see in the Shamsha here that is of note? Keeping in mind that it was the moon, Mars, and Rahu, which was encompassed the years of his unbelievable career.
Mars in the 10th house with directional strength.
If you go by Parashara Horror, with Rahu forming a nodal Raja Yoga, exalted.
Yeah, that's right.
What about the moon?
In the Lagna.
In the Lagna.
Exchange. Very powerful.
The exchange. Thank you. So this is Jyotish. It's amazing. And never, I've been doing it for 23 years now. It still never ceases to amaze me when you see these things. Okay.
This chart has a special yoga mark. It's called Gaudi Yoga Phal.
Go ahead and talk about that. You were talking about D10, or you're talking about Rashi?
No. I'm just joking. I'm just saying you get the status of a god. It's the God Yoga.
The God Yoga. I didn't hear what you said. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a very unique. This you can't hardly get better mutual co-workers than what you have here. This is my point. This is my point in showing this chart. Because it's mutual co-workers that are in angle relationship with each other. In angles from the birth chart, they're actually turning out to be the strongest angles. They are exalted planets, both, and they're near their most deepest point of exaltation. I can't think of better, and they're mutual, and they're friends, right? It's hard to think of better mutual co-workers than these two guys in his chart.
Mark, just one point here. We are talking in this article about, I don't think so, but nevertheless, having started asking that question, I will ask. Kendra, Trikona Sambandhas, which form good yogas. But I suppose Kendra, Trikona Sambandhas can also be the source of Arishtas?
I'm glad you brought that up. I believe so. And I'm going to, I'm going to show a chart that you shared with me, Venkat, that I believe, helps substantiate that. But let's save that, okay?
Yeah.
Now apply Udu's clue here. Whose nakshatra is Mars in?
Its own nakshatra?
In zone.
Yes. Its own nakshatra, right? Which I believe is another, additional factor in terms of why this period gave the results that it did. But, when I first saw this chart, it reminded me of another one of a god of baseball, right?
Pete Rose.
You probably know who I'm talking about, or Rohit remembers. It was Pete Rose, right? Because you see this, you get the same mutual co-workers. Now, what's the difference here?
They're not in Kendra from the Lagna.
They're not in Kendra from the Lagna. Mars is not quite so exalted. Right? Now, the sun is not in deep exaltation, but what else additionally good status does it get?
It's going to be exalted in all the charts.
it's first of all, it's going to be it's going to be Vargotama first in the Navamsha, but it's going to fall in Aries in a lot of the divisional charts. He first experienced baseball stardom. By the way, those who don't know who Pete Rose is, he's an American baseball player who holds the record for the most hits ever, career hits, right? Perennial all-star. Unfortunately, he had a gambling problem that he eventually ended up getting disgraced and being kicked out of baseball. But, you know, a legendary baseball player. His initial success came in the Mercury Mahadasha. How would you understand this and why? Somebody maybe who hasn't responded before. How does Mercury elevate him, give him great success, name, fame? By what principles could we understand that? Okay.
It's the fourth lord and first.
Well, it's an angle lord in a trine house because the first house qualifies for both.
And that Dikbala, it has the Dikbala.
It has some directional strength. Why else?
Moon, Mercury from Moon in an angled relationship. Moon happens to be the fifth lord, so it's a fourth, fifth, and 7-5 Raja Yoga there.
If you take Trikona Sambandha, you could see that relationship. I'm talking about something more basic. First of all, you know, go ahead.
It's Saraswati Yoga.
It is with the third of effort, which is exalted, and it's conjunct Venus. So,
well, it shows why he's playing baseball during this time. You know, because highly exalted Vargotama, third lord of sports. But I'm saying, how does Mercury give Raja Yoga here? That's what I'm getting at.
okay.
Remember Nietzsche Bhanga Raja Yoga?
Yeah.
First of all, a planet has to be Nietzsche Bhanga, which the effective cancellation here comes from, of course, from being with the exalted Venus. And then what's the other thing that has to be in order for a planet not just to be Nietzsche Bhanga, but Nietzsche Bhanga Raja Yoga?
It should be in an angle itself.
Angle or trine, but better in an angle. So this is why Mercury proved to be.
There is also a Prabala aspect here, Mark. Mercury conjunct Ketu. Ketu in the first house acting like a trine lord, and Venus as the fourth and the seventh lord. This is a nodal Raja Yoga as well.
I think you meant to say Mercury, not Venus, but yes, there's a nodal Raja Yoga, and that's another reason.
I meant Mercury, sorry.
And of course, what period follows Mercury?
Ketu.
His halcyon years were the 17 years of Mercury and then the following dasha of Ketu. Now, anybody want to hazard a guess? Well, I'll just tell you, it was the sub period of Mars that he broke into the league and became Rookie of the Year in his Mercury-Mars period. You'll see the operation of the mutual co-worker here, because Mars just appears to give Dhan Yoga, right? Just appears to give Dhan Yoga as, there's a 211 exchange here, but as a mutual co-worker, it gives this Raja Yoga effect as well. And then, you see the support for this in D10. What do you notice here? First of all, you've got period and sub-period of two planets, Sambandha. Now they happen to fall in a good ninth house. Any source of strength for Mars here?
Exchange.
Everybody see it's in a Parivartana Yoga with its Lord, Saturn. So Mercury Mars launched him into baseball stardom for these reasons. But it's I'm showing you this chart because of the mutual co-worker idea with Sun and Mars, just as in the case of Sanchin Telker. Now, who recognizes this name? Anyone?
The French president.
This is a man who had a very long, distinguished career as a French politician. He was mayor of Paris. More significantly, he was twice president of France. You know, I think you first brought this chart to my attention because you asked me a question about it, Rohit. You remember this?
I used this one and Pete Rose's chart for Yoga because they both have Yogara
Oh,
planets.
that's right. So you used it for Yogata. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, right. But what strikes you here of significance in this chart, in particular?
Mars,
The
Sun,
co-workers and the two Mahapurusha yogs.
Go ahead, Venkat, and then Rohit. What did you say, Venkat? What did you say?
Mars Sun exchange is one thing.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. I take it back. Absolutely, you're right. The Sun and Mars exchange. Okay, very good. And then Rohit, you said?
Two Mahapurusha yogas, which are also with Sasha and Sasha yoga by Saturn and Malavi yoga by Venus, and also the mutual co-worker concept because
That's it. That's why I'm showing you this chart. Now, normally you would just look at this chart and you'd say, okay, you got Saturn, Mahapurusha Yoga, Lagna Lord in the Lagna, good. And then you've got Yoga Karka Venus, 10th Lord in the 10th house, really good, right? But you wouldn't necessarily see them as forming any kind of yoga, right? But look at degrees even, you know, according to this idea that, or concept that was part of this last article, they are very powerful, you know, mutual co-workers, and in their periods and subperiods then can give that result. He first became president of France in his Rahu major period. So what's one way you would think about that?
Rahu giving Saturn.
Rahu giving the results of Saturn. That's not the whole story, but that, you know, it is certainly part of the story. Rahu giving the results of Saturn, which of course is activating the mutual co-worker combination. Now, you know, applying other principles here, it was in the subperiod of the sun. It was in the subperiod of the sun that he first became president. I think it was like 1995 or something like that. You know, first of all, think about the sun in terms of strength. Venkat indicated it was involved in an exchange with Mars, so of course that's a source of strength. But what other source of strength does it have?
Sun is Vargotama.
Sun Vargotama. Now apply Dasha Lagna.
710 exchange from Rahu.
710 exchange because, you know, the sun with Mercury falls in the 10th from Rahu, right?
Yeah.
Falls in the 10th from Rahu.
And also Sun is in the nakshatra of Saturn, giving thereby the results of Saturn.
Thank you, Venkat. Good.
And also Sun is going to give the results of Mercury partially.
It is.
Because it's the neutral 8th lord. Mercury is the 9th lord, for which is a very Mercury is a very beneficial chart for this planet for this chart.
Can be. It's also the 6th lord.
Also, no. Mercury is part. Also, there's a Moon is Moon on the other side.
What's interesting is to note. Actually, you know, this is all clear from Jaimini as to why these periods gave the result they did. As you know, Rohit's worked on it. He knows that. Because really, I think just based on the Rashi, unless you kind of can see it in hindsight, the second period when he became president, which I believe was 2002, was Jupiter-Saturn. Saturn's clear enough, just for everything we've already talked about, but, you know, by what principles could Jupiter give this kind of result?
Viprit Raj Yoga.
Pardon?
Viprit Raj Yoga.
And that would be part of my explanation. Which one are you referring to here? What combination are you talking about?
The 12th lord and the 8th, and with malefics, and the 12th lord also aspected by, well, Moon here would you would take to be a malefic. So,
well, this is part of what I'd see. And then, if you apply Dasha Lagna, what does the exchange become from there, and what kind of combination does Jupiter and Mars become?
1-4 exchange.
1-4 exchange, and the combination of Jupiter and Mars for Leo becomes a very, very superior Raja Yoga. Now, we're seeing that in hindsight. I'm not sure that, you see Jupiter has a source of strength here in Navamsha, right? In Swakshetra. In fact, fairly strong. We got Vargotama exalted moon, Vargotama sun, Jupiter and own sign, Vargotama Mars. One of the reasons that this horoscope had a certain quality to it that related to the status that he obtained in life has to do with these, really strong positions of these planets. And then, Rahu, Sun, and Jupiter, Saturn become. And by the way, I think this Dashamsha Lagna is not Gemini but Taurus. I think this Dashamsha Lagna is not Gemini and Taurus, but again, that's speculation on my part. Think about Rahu, Sun, and then think about Jupiter, Saturn. It becomes more explainable from a Taurus Lagna, but a speculation on my part. This is not a name that anybody would particularly recognize. He was actually a very prominent clergyman in America that they actually made a movie out of his life. And he was you might say, pastor to the United States Senate for a period of time. I think it was back in the 40s and so on. Looking at this chart, what strikes you as a notable feature and why?
Venus and Mercury co-workers.
That's it.
And in Aries, Venus in the 10th house.
That's it, exactly. You've got Mercury, Lagna Lord in the Lagna, Swakshetra, then you've got a highly exalted Vargotama Venus in the 10th from there, in their mutual co-workers. He first came to prominence in his Rahu major period. And again, how would that be predictable?
Rahu giving the results of Venus.
With Rahu giving the results of Venus, right? Does it form, does it give Raja Yoga in any other way? No, not really. So I won't go into that. But you'll notice that from Chandra Lagna, right? Rahu goes to the 10th. And these are mutual co-workers, whether they're falling in angle houses or not, right? So say that the Lagna was Capricorn. In this case, it's Chandra Lagna. Right? I would want it to register with you that the 10th house from there has Rahu giving the results of Venus, and what kind of results does Venus give? Because it's in this angular relationship with these good dignities, these planets become, of course, it's Raja Yoga Karaka from Capricorn anyway, but it becomes that Venus-Mercury combination, which is from there the 9-10 combination.
Yep.
So this is what I'm suggesting that you be alert to now as you think about charts. Okay.
In fact, the Chandra Lagna argument combines both the points you are making in the lesson. One is the co-worker, and second is Kendra Trikona Sambandhas also should be considered for checking the Raja and Dana Yogas.
Well, that's my view. I've made my decision about that. I told you it's up to everybody now to decide whether they believe this is valid or not.
Your students will follow you, Mark.
Well, it's right out of the Shastra. I'm not making it up, right?
Yeah, that's right. You said that.
Now, Rohit and I were discussing this chart because, of course, he's been in the news. He was the #1 seed for the U.S. Open. This is the very successful, famous Spanish tennis player. Big tournament going on in the U.S. called the U.S. Open. He was the #1 seed and made it to the semifinals, but lost yesterday. He had to retire due to his knee. He's had chronic difficulty with one knee, tendonitis, and it just became overwhelmingly painful yesterday. affected his play, and he had to retire. So he lost. I wanted to discuss this. Doesn't have much relationship, quite frankly, to the main lesson, except Udu's clue. He first came to prominence, and Rohit, why don't you stay silent for this one because we already discussed this. He first came to prominence as a tennis player in his Venus Mahadasha. Again, in what way was that predictable?
Venus is Rahu.
Venus Mahadasha. In what way was that predictable?
Venus is.
I know there's a lot of people out listening out there who are good Jyotishis. Speak up.
Venus is in Rahu's Dasha, Rahu's Nakshatra.
Well, just wait. I mean, not even think about it as a tennis player. What just shows that this would give him a professional rise in status?
Yeah, so Lagna Lord at 9th, with the 9th Lord.
Yeah, it's Raja Yoga, folks.
Yeah.
It's Lagna Lord. What's Raja in Dana Yoga? It's Lagna Lord in the 9th with the 9th Lord. So 1-9. Remember, the classics of Jyotish highlight 3 combinations in particular for Raja Yoga: 9-10, 1-10, 1-9, particularly if they're falling in those houses. In this case, it's not just 1-9, but it's 1-9 in the 9th house. And then what adds to that?
Jupiter, aspect of Jupiter.
Aspect of Jupiter helps qualify that. And the reason in my mind how the Venus Mahadasha shows him being involved in competitive sports is the Trikona Sambandha, close Trikona Sambandha between Venus and Jupiter, not just Jupiter's aspect onto there. They're connected in my mind in a couple of different ways. But then what adds to the Raja Yoga also of Mercury and Venus?
The aspect of Mars.
Mutual glance with Mars. Mars is an angle lord here, right?
Angle.
Combined, besides being a Vargotama planet in the 3rd house, Mars, sports, competition, right? Does anybody want to hazard a guess of which sub-period proved to be a breakout year? In 2008, he won an Olympic gold medal for Spain, and he also won Wimbledon. Do you have an idea which sub-period?
Jupiter.
Pardon?
Jupiter?
Not a bad guess, but it wasn't Jupiter. What activates the Raja Yoga? Go back to from Laghu Parashri. Mercury would be a good guess, and that was a very good period for him where he was on the rise professionally. But what's another sub-period that gives this?
Mars.
Was it Venus Rahu?
Venus K2, folks. Whose results does K2 give?
Venus.
Venus's results. Venus K2, but Venus Mercury, Venus K2, very, very good periods. Now he's been running the moon period. Which of course is a 10th lord. He's actually been running moon Rahu. Right? But you don't see any Raja Yoga here that the moon is giving. Right? Not by placement, not by aspect, not by conjunction. It's the 10th lord strongly placed in the 7th. Okay. It's not a bright moon. In fact, quite the opposite.
Closely conjunct Rahu, which is not really good for the moon.
So apply Udu's clue in terms of the kind of results, some of the results that the moon can give.
Moon is in Ketu's Nakshatra.
Whose results does Ketu give?
Venus, it gives the results of Venus.
And you're back to the Raja Yoga.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you look at his D10, and you'll see, where is that D10 or is that Navamsha? That's Navamsha. What's going on with the moon here that's good?
A lot of the 5th in the, a lot of the 5th in the 4th with the 4th lord.
Does it have any source of strength?
Directional strength?
Directional strength, yes.
Yeah, directional strength, does it get additionally qualified in any particular way?
It also gets aspect of Jupiter.
It's the aspect of Jupiter. Some period was Rahu when he's been playing very, very good tennis. Did he win the French Open? Did he win the French Open?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, he's very highly ranked now. Do you know his ranking at the moment, Rohit?
He is number one, but I think if Djokovic wins this, the US Open, I think he would move to number one.
But he has been number one.
Oh, yeah, he is still number one, yeah.
Yeah, he has been number one. He went into this tournament seeded him. So in other words, he's at the top of the tennis world. Right? And that's been happening in Moon Rahu. Really too bad about, his knee problem. But I wanted to discuss this. This is again off topic, but I wanted to discuss this from the Jaimini point of view because, looking at the moon, it would be rather circuitous, and you'd have to apply Uru's clue to try to get at why the moon period is proving to be so successful. Of course, we just looked at D10. That's part of the story. But you know me, I'm a Jaimini guy. I like elegant simplicity. He was running his Taurus major period. He's been running his Taurus major period. What strikes you? Somebody else besides Rohit.
Jupiter. I'm going to take Karaka in the 10th.
For the 10th from there is Jupiter in Aquarius. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not just Jupiter as the AMK, but Jupiter in Aquarius falling 10th from there. And what about the Lord? What about the sign itself? What principle that you've learned from me could be applied there that might show that the sun period, I gave it away, the Taurus period could prove particularly make him his star shine. Just having the sun there, folks. Remember this idea? Mm. He's running the major period of a sign containing the sun. And by the way, this sign is the 6th house from Karkam Shalagna. Right? And anybody, he's been number one. He won the French Open. He was, number one seed going to the U.S. Open. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to what has been the sub-period that he's been running in Charadasha? Major period of Taurus. What sub-period?
Aquarius.
Good guess. Yes. He's been running the sub-period. Remember this idea when you're running the major period from where the AMK falls 10, and then you run the sub-period of the sign containing the AMK? This is where you see the big fruit. But here's what I noticed. September 3rd, he moved out of the Aquarius sub-period.
Oh.
Right? And moved into Capricorn, which does not look as good. And I had the thought, I didn't publish it, I had the thought, is things gonna take a downturn now? Has he kind of peaked in this period and sub-period? And it would appear that turned out to be the case, unfortunately for him. And due to an injury, not his play, which is too bad. But that's life.
Hey, Mark. This is Michael. The Mars
lurking in the background there.
Yes,
Michael.
Lurking in the shadows. The Mars transit has been tough on his knees.
Say more about that.
Well, just going through Capricorn, retrograde now direct, but hitting the house and the Lord basically. I think that's
Capricorn ruling the knees. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, but sure, the sign of the knees, but also hitting the 10th house.
Oh, I
and
see.
hitting the moon, the Lord of the 10th house. That's house of knees.
I see. Yeah.
And the 10th Lord is in Ashwini.
Say more about that, Luciana. Say more about that.
No, Ashwini rules the knees, and he has 2 planets being afflicted by Mars.
Okay. Well, this adds some wonderful color to the discussion, so I appreciate those comments.
One more thing about this chart is the abundance of planets in Ayud, weapon Trikona.
Well, you better say more about that. Not that everybody knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, weapon where you like to have a tool or instrument, something in your hands, and you use it well. And
talk about what those what those Trikonas are.
Trikonas are signs divided into 3 sections.
No, not what the Trikona are, but those specific Trikonas
the weapon.
Yeah, the weapon.
Weapon Trikonas. 1st and 3rd of Aries is weapon, is Ayud. second and third of Gemini. So look at the abundance. The moon and Rahu
Right.
are both Ayud, weapon Drekana. The Mercury's in a weapon Drekana, sitting 3 from the moon. Very competitive and very skilled use of the hands.
Right. Now remember, he was, went from Chandralagna, he rose up in the ranks of tennis in his Venus period, 3rd from the moon. Those are wonderfully additional comments. Thank you for that, Michael. For people who want to explore more what Michael's talking about, in Paladipika, in the section on the signs, you'll have different signs, drekanas within signs designated in a certain way. All of you have heard about the idea of sarpadreshko and sarpadrekanas from me. But then, there are these armed drekanas as well. Of course, his weapon was a tennis racket. In this case, kind of a...
The Mars is also in a weapon Drekana. The Mars in the 3rd Drekana of Sagittarius.
So if people want to see what these are, we have 2 experts on the nakshatras here participating, at least 2. We might have more. So I'm glad Luciana and Michael are participating, because these are additionally wonderful comments. Anything else then with regards to this? Okay, folks, this is what I had to share with you today. As I said in the one email, you'll soon be receiving another article from me. In fact, the pace will, I think for the remainder of the year, you'll be getting 2 a month to catch up and get the full 12 that you all signed up for. And so we'll be having webinars associated with these as well. And if people have a topic that you might like me to write an article about, I'm open to suggestion, okay? Just don't make the topic retrograde planets.
Don't make it retrograde planets.
Don't suggest that the article should be on retrograde planets, right? Because it's the biggest mystery and enigma in Jyotish, of which I have no definitive answers for. I have some ideas and I have some concepts that are very, very reliable, but in general, that's an enigma wrapped in a mystery, the behavior of retrograde planets. Enjoy the rest of our Saturdays here. Om Masatoma Sadgamita Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mitruma Ramatamgamaya Sarvesam Shanti Bhavatu Sarvesam Asti Bhavatu Sarvesam Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesam Mangalam Bhavatu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavatu Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Take care, everyone, until we meet again. Namaste.